This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
You are tuned in to the FowlWeather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
There is no better place to get the skinny on the 2024 duck migration than from practicing experts. We interview Bo Bauer, wildlife biologist with Nemours Wildlife Foundation in South Carolina. Houston Havens, waterfowl program coordinator for Mississippi. Ryan Delaney, proprietor of Wildlife Strategies about Arkansas conditions. Captain Aiden Flores in Texas of Heritage Flats Guide Service and Outfitters. He's also an R3 coordinator for Delta Waterfowl Foundation for Texas and beyond. Last up, we talked with Reed Vagut, migratory bird coordinator for Missouri. Has the WSI worked to predict duck migration correctly this year? Find out. That, and we announced the Week 1 Listener Appreciation FowlWeather Podcast winner, and we once again produced the only duck migration forecast available. Hey, thanks everyone for listening, and remember to share, like, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. Take a second to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as share the FowlWeather Podcast with friends. Remember that you know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. We're really thankful for our every week listeners. You folks know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the FowlWeather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. Also remember that we are the only science-based duck migration forecast available. Brought to you by hunters, for hunters. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. My mantra lately has been Crocs till you can't. Think about that. So Crocs is footwear until you can't, until the snow gets too deep that it comes in those little holes. So pretty early and brutal cold at the farm as we keep the wood stove stocked and the tractor is out. This is certainly different than our long-term forecast, but we also did note that this year was much more of a wild card than last. And as you listen later in the episode to the migration updates from our practicing wildlife biologist friends in the Atlantic, Mississippi, and Central Flyways, you will generally hear good news on duck migration all around, certainly better than last year. Next week at the farm, we look to have a warm-up to 55 degrees with a bit of rain, way up here in Jack's Reef country. But then we drop right back down below freezing after a few days. Our long-term forecast update for Eastern North America is a mid-December warm-up, but then a possibility of more cold into the holiday season. But there is really a fork in the atmospheric road here, and we won't be able to be confident in a cold Christmas in the east for another week or so. We are confident enough, though, that this winter is going to be cold, that the ice hut for ice fishing is off the shelf in the barn, and we're getting those rods and tip-ups ready for an early ice fishing season this year in Jack's Reef country. So why the cold so early? We had mentioned the Arctic sea ice and how it affects northern hemisphere snow, kind of cold pressures, cold high pressure systems and such, and that can cause kind of polar vortex stretching. And that is kind of what has happened here. Some areas of the Arctic kind of remain ice-free, which provides that humidity or water energy for heavy snowfall in the northern hemisphere. This is like a giant episode of what happens with lake effect snow, but with the Arctic open and then just dumping massive amounts of snow kind of in the high Arctic in places. And that sets in motion pressure systems that kind of squeeze and stretch the polar vortex. This typically results in weather kind of whiplash with very cold and then warm and then cold and then warm. So right now, we don't have a full-blown polar vortex disruption, which could cause kind of extended cold. So prepare for ups and downs in the weather and many shots of lake effect snow in the Great Lakes region. We had predicted potential for strong lake effect followed by warm-ups that could lead to localized flooding in fields and rivers. So keep your eye out for those conditions and follow the ducks that might follow those resources in the Great Lakes region. Anyhow, for now at the farm, we are in the whiplash mode, looking to take advantage of kind of cold days on the big water and then thaw periods in the fields and rivers where possible as those ducks kind of jump around. As noted, hey, you got to adapt to each year's different conditions, and you can't just lean up against the same oak tree in the same woods for 20 years and expect the same thing as a duck hunter over and over again. This year is certainly different than last year. In a bit here, we will hear from our practicing wildlife biologists, folks in the field doing the counts and managing the habitat in seasons for you, the duck people across duck country. They're also passionate duck hunters themselves. Don't forget that. All right, we're also excited to announce the pre-orders are open for Foul Weather hoodies, hats, and stickers. Find them at FowlWeather.co and click on Shop in the upper right corner. Remember, we're not Amazon. So these are pre-orders, and when we get enough orders, they will be finished and shipped. So thanks for your patience, my friends. Just like the quality forecast we produce, we went with high-quality Carhartt Rain Defender hoodies. These are forever hoodies. That is, you won't need another one, and they are weather ready. We also have great Carhartt hats or beanies, if you want to call them that, with the Foul Weather logo on them, and sticker packs for your trucks and gear to show your support for the Foul Weather Podcast. So thanks for your orders, and keep them coming. And the news you've been waiting for, if you entered your name into the Listener Appreciation Foul Weather Podcast Sweepstakes, this week's winner of a pit bag in shadow camo is Dan Miller from Michigan. Dan, look for a PM from us and send along your address so we can mail you out your great prize. If you haven't caught up yet, remember we are doing a Listener Appreciation Foul Weather Podcast Sweepstakes over the next 5 weeks. In addition to the Foul Weather Podcast, the sweepstakes is sponsored by the Farmland Group and Wildlife Strategies. The rules are simple. Now, with 4 weeks left in the sweepstakes, we will be giving away 4 more prizes. Once week 2 posts with an item and it's up on our Instagram and Facebook page, you need to tag a friend and tell us where you are from and the general area you tend to hunt. Not trying to spot steal. Something like White River or Great Lakes or Missouri is just fine. Everyone that tags someone and adds this information will be entered into the sweepstakes. If the tag people want to be entered, all they need to do is also tag a friend. Each Sunday, we will randomly draw a winner. Announce it on the podcast on Monday and post it to our social media outlets. We will then contact the winner by PM to get their address. A note, though, you will have to be a follower of the Foul Weather Podcast on Facebook or Instagram for us to be able to contact you by personal message or PM. It's just how it is. There's nothing we can do about it. There's no way we can contact somebody if they're not actual followers. It doesn't allow you to just kind of rip out and find people on Facebook. Anyhow, items will be high-quality logo gear from Wildlife Strategies and the Foul Weather Podcast. We appreciate our listeners and really want to see y'all represent the podcast in the field and diners across Duck Country, USA. This week, our prize will be a Sitka Dakota hoodie in size small or medium, so look to our Instagram and Facebook pages to enter. Next up, we meet with the biologist and get habitat and migration updates from South Carolina, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, and Missouri. So please stick with us. Look, folks, the Farmland Group across the Mid-South is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisals. If you own land or you want land, the Farmland Group is where it's at. With over $500 million in farm sales and growing, Gwynn and Shelby Smith have you covered. Look, if you're thinking about buying or selling, contact the Farmland Group to access their full suite of services. If you already own property and want to build equity and value, the Farmland Group gets it done. If you're looking to purchase a new property, well, they get that done too, and they have access to some of the best lending available. Looking to sell? Get it appraised with a Farmland Group affiliated appraiser. But let's be clear for our listenership too. They also offer farm and hunt property management to create places that attract more ducks and more bucks. Who doesn't want that? More ducks and more bucks. Let the Farmland Group build value into your property. Find them today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. You're not going to be disappointed. Contact Shelby Smith today at farmlg.com and let him know that the Foul Weather Podcast sent you their way. All right, and we are back with better than last year weather up north. We got 5 practicing wildlife biologists on the line to let us know what they're seeing across duck country USA, across the central Mississippi and Atlantic flyway. Thanks to everyone that jumped on the line with us in the past few days. And remember, these are recordings from Thursday and Friday of last week, so conditions may have changed. And certainly, hang on until the end of the episode for this week's duck migration forecast. I do want to apologize a bit on these recordings. We had some settings that were off, and so we had some logistical issues on our end, so I sound like I am in a shoebox. But hang with us because these are really great interviews with practicing experts in the field. First up this week in our reports as we move from east to west, we have Bo Bauer, wildlife biologist with Nemours Wildlife Foundation in the Ace Basin in South Carolina. So welcome to the podcast, Bo, and maybe just start out, introduce yourself real quickly, as well as maybe what's the Ace Basin? A lot of our listeners might not know exactly what that acronym means.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on. This is really exciting. And yeah, for our listeners out there, your listeners out there, my name is Bo Bauer. I've been the wildlife biologist at Nemours Wildlife Foundation for about 12 years now. And so kind of introducing the Ace Basin here to the audience, maybe. It's this region on the coast of South Carolina between south of Charleston, between Charleston and Beaufort, South Carolina. And it's an acronym that stands for the Ashepoo, Combahee, and Edisto rivers, and these all drain into the St. Helena Sound. It's an amazing, ecologically intact area, really well known worldwide as a conservation model, and lots of phenomenal duck habitat and great knowledge on the ground of duck habitat and wetland managers, both private and public as well.
Yeah, very cool. And I traveled down there during, which hurricane was it that I sat through at Nemours?
That was Helene.
Helene. So how did you guys fare a little bit on growing conditions this year and how Helene made things maybe difficult for producing habitat for ducks?
Well, I can only speak for our property, really. And we have about 2,000 acres of managed wetlands here at Nemours Wildlife Foundation. Most of that's brackish habitat. So of course, yeah, Helene hit us harder than we expected on the coast. We did have a significant storm surge. We had some washover on some of our dike infrastructure along the rivers. And of course, with that, you're going to lose some of your submerged aquatic vegetation production. Primarily widgeon grass is our number one food we grow in our brackish systems here. But overall, once you recover from that, there was still, in my opinion, adequate biomass of food available out there because widgeon grass is just very robust, right? Mm-hmm. For those who, do the, planting agricultural crops and flood, I don't think they did as well. Of course, there's a lot of rainfall with that event too. So that probably soured a lot of those, more agricultural foods. Moist soil units probably suffered a little bit as well. We kind of we had some really good growth, really good production on moist soil units prior to Hurricane Helene. And so that held on after the storm. It's looking really good now, and it's holding a bunch of ducks at this moment too. So yeah, from my perspective, food production again looked really well despite having the hurricane. We had some odd rain events too, but we have the infrastructure and the ability, at least here at Nemours, to recover from those kind of events pretty well, and we're fairly robust to that kind of this kind of I'm gonna mess that word up. Mike might have to edit this one. Perturbations.
You're good. You're good. You're good. We misspeak all
you don't
the
mind
time
doing some
on
editing
here.
on that?
Don't worry. We edit where needed. You're solid. Hey, so you're in your split right now. When did you all open down there for duck season? Was it like the Saturday?
Yeah, our first hunt. Yeah, the Saturday before Thanksgiving. We had our first hunt on November 23rd.
Okay, and so you're closed now, but duck numbers are, have you seen recent increase? I've reported about, good cold weather. I'm watching. I mean, I got lake effect snow just crushing me here at the farm in Jack's Reef right now, and there's cold moving down to the Chesapeake and even down into North Carolina. And so our prediction over the last week, specifically last week, is that y'all should be picking up a lot of green wings, shovelers, things like that. So what have you been seeing?
Well, your forecasts have been pretty darn accurate on those fronts, Mike. Yeah, seeing a good push of birds now, and thank you for the cold weather up north, because that's what we need. That's what we need for hunting success down here on the coast of South Carolina. We have lots of phenomenal habitat down here, but it takes those good cold fronts up your way to bring us the birds. So, the last couple of weeks, seeing a nice a nice increase in our bird numbers. Blue-winged teal, we're holding probably a few thousand blue-winged teal easily. I just looked out in the pond, a few hours ago, one of our main impoundments. And so that looks good. We have blue-winged teal in good numbers throughout most of the season, but right now it's really up there. Exciting with that as well is I've noticed probably a twofold increase in the amount of green-winged teal that have shown up within the last week.
Nice.
A bird that we'll have in smaller numbers earlier in the season that picks up, usually for green-winged teal mid-January for us. So seeing those numbers right now, and I'm seeing those on the larger river complexes and in our inland moist soil units and other impoundments we have. So yeah, green-winged teal and some great numbers. Shovelers have their numbers have increased right now as well. I'm starting to see more appreciable numbers of gadwall at the moment, and I've seen some pintail out there as well. For us to see bigger ducks like that, especially early in the season. That's very promising. That's great to look at. Even a few mallards out there. Of course, being South Carolina, it's hard to say whether these are wild mallards or mutt mallards that have been released. But that's just the world we live in down here as well. Yep. And actually saw some true black ducks and then amongst some larger flocks of mottled ducks.
Wow,
this morning.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. I just really don't see a lot of true black ducks.
Well, and it's like you're not sure if you see a true black duck until it's in with a flock of mottled ducks. It's like, hey, is that a fawn or is that a full mature doe over there? And then the mature doe steps out, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's a fawn, right? So there's that contrast between the mottled and the black duck help make that black duck stick out a little bit, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it certainly helps when you have those species together to make that distinction. Because when they are together, the black ducks really stand out from the mottled ducks. Yeah. So that was exciting to see. Some other noteworthy observations I had this morning as well is ruddy ducks. We had a lot of ruddy ducks just show up. So they were out in the pond in force, saw some bufflehead. More mergansers this morning that I've seen in the last couple of weeks as well. Hooded mergansers.
Hooded mostly, yeah.
And even saw a few canvasbacks, which that is
That's
again not
common.
A bird I see. Yeah, I don't. Especially we're managing mostly for puddle ducks, so to see some canvasbacks out there with a few pintail, shovelers, and blue-winged teal. I guess they didn't read the book, Mike, but
they didn't read the book. Hey, we had the same thing this year. I keep saying canvasbacks should have held up a lot on the Great Lakes for a long time, and man, we had a big push, and it's interesting this year. I'm not sure what's going on with them, but they seem to be cranking through and showing up in all kinds of places. So I think people should just keep their eye out for them as like that prize bird in some of these places where they don't typically show up. But man, compared to last year, that El Nino year, it was horrible. It was warm everywhere. This year feels a lot better, Bo. What do you think I'm just guessing your ahead time schedule for migration, but like if you were to guess like time frame, what the birds are ahead of schedule, maybe compared to last year, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, with the with the sheer number of green-winged teal that just arrived, I mean, I would, I hate to be put on the spot on something like this, but 2 to 3 weeks ahead would be um, maybe a good estimate there, if
Okay.
if not more. But certainly, as you said, it feels duckier around here right now, and wherever that means. And it's just, I don't see these types of numbers of green wing teal this early, so that has me
Yeah.
feeling like we're ahead of our average.
Well, I'm really interested where those are coming from. If they're coming from the prairies or they're coming from the east, we're doing a stable isotope project funded by Delta Waterfowl, and y'all are helping out with some of that stuff as well, just to collect wings and then see where these run some stable isotopes, see what latitude these birds are coming from, and then some band analysis to kind of focus on east-west stuff. But the Atlantic flyway this year had a huge bump in their green-winged teal population from the breeding estimates, and that was seen by everybody. I mean, when we got into them here locally, there were way more than normal, and that's been kind of the common thought. So I think a lot of your green wings are actually, kind of east of Hudson Bay. I think a lot of those are Quebec birds. Interestingly, right? We think about just the prairies as the breadbasket for ducks, which it is. I'm never going to take away from that. But a lot of our East Coast waterfowl do still come out of Quebec, and we should not ignore that. So that's just great news that you've got birds this early. Hopefully that's happening for all the plantations down there and on the public land. So hopefully people are getting after it. As we said last week, if your barrels aren't hot this week across every flyway, you're not doing your homework. So good stuff, Bo. We might
Yeah,
have you
no,
back
I
on.
wish I wasn't I wish I wasn't the split right now. I mean, this morning it is like windy, it's overcast, it's cold, and the ducks are flocked up and they're
Uh,
feeding, and it's like, oh boy, that'd be a morning to get out. And just real quick, on about the green wing teal aspect
Fire
there,
away.
Mike. Just some context there. So on our opening day this season, November 23rd, we harvested. Let's say we harvested 15 green wing teal. That was across a dozen hunters.
Hmm.
No big deal there. The same time last year, though, that number was 5.
Yeah, yeah, for sure,
So,
for sure.
not that, the harvest records are an indicator of anything really, but it does kind of let you know, seeing more green wing teal here this early than we would normally see.
Good stuff, Bo. And y'all have an amazing history down there at Nemours and all those plantations in the Ace Basin. And we'd love to have you back on to talk that history one of these days. Or maybe if I'm back down there, we can sit down over a good bourbon and have that chat too. So really appreciate you on, Bo, and everything you do for the ducks at Nemours Wildlife Foundation. And have a wonderful rest of your season, bud.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And thanks again for having me on. Really appreciate the opportunity, Mike. Thank you.
All right, up next, we've got Houston Havens, the waterfowl program coordinator for the great state of Mississippi. So, welcome, Houston, to the Fowl Weather Podcast.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and really interested to see what you all are getting into. We just talked to folks in South Carolina. After that, we'll go to Arkansas and then talk to the waterfowl biologist in Missouri. But really want to get a feel for what's going on in Mississippi. A lot of the listeners know that I spent a fair bit of time there during my younger years, I would say. And you and I spent a little bit of time together. We actually hunted together last year in that horrible El
Good.
Nino year, and had some good laughs, pet a wet dog, and stared at some decoys in the water, but didn't do much shooting. But just why don't you start out, Houston, by telling us about what the habitat conditions across the state kind of look like late summer into the fall, and what ducks should be prepared for to see, as well as duck hunters.
Yeah, so we had some tropical weather, hurricanes in mid-September, early fall, that spun up some rain through a large portion of the state, particularly the Mississippi Delta. And one thing that we noticed this year, we were on a really, really dry summer trend similar to last year. until we got those rains, those tropical rains. And we saw some really good late season moist soil production out of those in areas that honestly we had kind of written off and given up on, but they still did have some time to get some good seed production in those. And so, I would say in general, moist soil wetland conditions are a little better than last year, maybe even a little above average. Um, but as far as drought conditions, wetland availability, we're looking at still below average.
Mm.
Not as bad as last year. Last year was an extreme drought, well into, over half of our duck season in Mississippi. So looking at a little bit better conditions, moisture conditions in the ground, should be good for catching some rainfall. We just need more of it to come for sure.
Yeah, so you don't have that sponge like you had last year, right? Like if anything spit
Right.
out of the sky, it just disappeared into a sponge. So now you at least have some saturation. So if you do get some rain, then you'll be able to hold it a little bit. You guys pump a fair bit though too on your waterfall areas, don't you?
We do wildlife management areas,
Hmm.
several national wildlife refuges, and quite a few, intensively managed private lands do a fair bit of groundwater pumping across the Mississippi Delta. Um, but still, the majority of the habitat that we eventually hope to have is going to be from catching rainfall. And so, yeah, you're right. Last year we saw some areas that were pumped in November and did not have surface water when we flew again
Right.
in December. And so we certainly don't want to see that again.
I hope you don't. And, I forecast kind of like with a La Nina winter coming, that you might be drier, but that La Nina effect seems to really be kind of fading a little bit, like the snow's coming across the Pacific Northwest and above. But the real dry, I'm not seeing it for you. I mean, there's rains coming across here and there in the southeast, and I really hope that kind of pattern continues a little bit as these kind of disturbances move across. Let's hope that La Nina dry that is predicted for y'all for kind of December, January doesn't happen. But let's get to your season open Thanksgiving week. What
We
did
did,
numbers
yeah.
what did numbers look like then? Let's start with that one. And what was like success on your managed areas in general, your public areas?
Yeah, so we do a November aerial waterfowl survey, and that was done about the middle of the month, second week of November, and things were really mild here then, really fairly dry, and so our numbers in that survey were really poor,
Mm.
and we got that report put out, and by the time the report was out, even the weather had started to change. We had started getting favorable conditions, cool north winds, bluebird
Hmm.
days, kind of textbook migration days. In fact, during that November survey, we did not observe a single snow or speck in that
Wow.
count, which is pretty surprising. And now, of course, things have changed for the better, and we've really improved. But yeah, reports have been pretty good from our MAV portion of the state, wildlife management areas. Harvest has been really good on those areas. Of course, we've only been open for a few days, and then we closed
Hmm.
again until Saturday this week.
Yeah, so between that time and now, you feel like you've gotten a little bit of weather. Y'all gonna fly again next week, so you haven't flown again, right? So
Yep,
you don't quite
that's
know what's
right.
out there, but the word on the street is that you've like what species do you think you've mostly picked up if you were gonna say that, and on a kind of rank of 1 to 10, how good do you feel about additional numbers of birds out there, something like that?
Yeah, I don't know about a rank necessarily, but certainly
I
the
I
species
kind of caught you with a
itself.
curveball there. I was kind of hoping for like, a 7 out of 10 or something like that. But
Sure.
anyhow, I hear you.
Certainly the species that I feel like we picked up a lot of green wings and gadwall. Those seem to be pretty dominant in the harvest reports that we've gotten, and the one draw hunt that I went and worked on opening day. Pintail is actually a little bit surprising, maybe a little bit more represented in the harvest. That's a bit anecdotal, but just generally what I've seen so far. Still an early migrating species for sure. Um, but hearing of decent hunting around, certainly some mallards. We're certainly nowhere near where we usually get with our peak mallard numbers. So hopefully more to come there, and that certainly would be expected. But yeah, in general, not a whole lot of poor hunting reports, and mostly pretty good ones so far.
That's good. That's good to hear. I don't want a repeat of last year. I really didn't want to talk about where are the ducks? And hey, they're kind of everywhere, and the Illinois River's still full of gadwall in January, which is just dumb. I don't want to see that. We want our fair share of these birds for while they move through, and then folks at mid latitudes, and then they get to y'all, and everybody gets a bit of them. We keep that waterfowl hunting culture going, and so it looks like this year has that opportunity. My expectation when I talk to Missouri here in a few minutes, and the listeners will hear that too, is that they're starting to ball up with mallards. And the one thing when I was in Mississippi that I hated to see was that count of 250,000 mallards, 250,000 mallards at Grand Pass, in week after week after week. It was the same number. So hopefully we can freeze them out of that latitude and, move them to y'all this year, Houston. So I think that people are a little mallard starved in the MAV right now.
Certainly. We'll welcome them, and we're ready for them.
Good deal. And I remember, the thing too is on the private lands, it's easier to get those mallards, to hold them, to meter your pressure. The public lands, I always just enjoyed the diversity of birds that were out there. We shot gadwall, we shot widgeon, we shot green wings, we shot pintails. We shot a lot of gadwall, honestly. Great decoy and duck. And, they eat well in most duck dishes. But the mallards were very tough to come by. And when we shot them, I think they were flight ducks on most days. They were like, oh, water, here we go, let's give it a try. But once they got banged at once or twice, those the mallard harvest dissipated pretty quickly. Is that generally your kind of feeling on the public lands in Mississippi?
It really is. And, it's one of the most common things that we hear from hunters as they're coming back in is, there were mallards there when we got there, but, as soon as daylight or right before, shooting light, they knew what was going on and they got out of there. And so it's not that mallards are not necessarily using those areas, but they get it figured out pretty quickly. And then, you'll have some, maybe the diehards that are, they're just there, they're making a day of it no matter what. And, they're staying past the mid-morning lull, and mallards will start to trickle back in some of those areas, and they'll still do pretty well.
All right, up next, we've got Ryan Delaney giving us a migration report from Arkansas. You'll recognize him from our advertisements and such with his wetland management consulting and other kind of upland game consulting as well with wildlife strategies. So, Ryan, thanks for taking some time with us from icy Arkansas. That's a weird way to say it in December, isn't it?
Hey, man, it's good to be on. A little ice this morning. Actually thicker than expected. I think we got into the teens in a lot of parts in eastern Arkansas, and there's some skim ice and some birds that got shuffled around because of it. And be interesting to see it's Friday afternoon. We'll see what the little thaw situation looks like. Our season's closed, so birds are kind of able to move freely.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. And I'm going to talk to Missouri later on. And, what I don't want to hear from them is they've got 250,000 mallards at Grand Pass and y'all don't have any of them. So I'm guessing you got the early wimpy ducks, but in your what folks call calendar ducks. But I guess you can talk to private and public land a little bit. But how's it looking compared to last year for the big ducks, for the mallards that we all want down your way?
Yeah, so mallard harvest during the first split was kind of on par with where it has been. I would say that there was a higher percentage of mallards overall in these wetland complexes that were holding ducks. I'm kind of surprised that the teal and the gadwall numbers weren't as strong as they have been in years past for the opener. I don't really know what's going on with that, but those that had large complexes of wetlands and a lot of surface water had some mallard shooting, and we were fortunate to have some really consistent mallard shooting. The reports I'm kind of getting up and down the state are very similar. Mallards being a pretty good portion of the bag, and mallards, using really historic deep water habitats in the swamps and the sloughs. The public land shooter has been doing pretty good where they found floodwaters from those fall rains. Mm-hmm. The northern half of the state, they've got a lot of rain. Those rivers pulsed out. I think there was some pretty good shooting to be had. the southern part of the state's really dry,
Mhm.
and we're kind of in here in the middle of that, in the central part of eastern Arkansas. And man, the thing I can notice is ducks are using the places that ducks like to always use: early and consistent habitat. Um, and sanctuary is obviously playing a big part of this. The people that are having good hunts are people that have inviolate sanctuaries that attract ducks from every direction when hunting pressure turns on.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I can't believe that with the weather y'all have now, that this isn't going to be a pretty spectacular opener to the second split when it happens. I'm not going to say it's spectacular in, you know, historic times, but compared to last year, right? Like this water situation must be substantially better than last year, right?
I think it is. I think we got to be careful not to complain too much. It's not great right now, but
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing that really compared to previous two seasons. How we entered the season. I just see, most of these deep river bottoms still have pocket water. They have sloughs. They have cypress lakes that are continuing to provide some habitat for ducks. Those were really, really, really gone last year. I mean, they were dried up. So we're in a lot better situations, more places to actually hunt too. I'm not
Right.
necessarily saying that it's spread the hunting pressure out, but people have the availability to get out and hunt, whereas last year that was really restrictive.
Yeah, so you mentioned something there that was interesting in historic distributions, and that's about having water early and ducks that kind of pattern into these locations, and that would be, pretty consistent with an older population too that's coming down as well, and we're still only working with 6.6 million mallards, I think was the number or something like that, right? And so probably a lot of birds that are well patterned to these places. And just hit on a little kind of comment on that and what you think might happen is if we do get some rains, reshuffling, things like that might move birds into maybe some non-traditional areas. But it does sound like they're at least hitting those places with consistent water, right?
Sure. And they showed up, on time for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that most of the mallards I've seen have been really locked in on those areas that they've had consistent early water. And we're hoping that, we see a little bit more water enter the landscape on Monday, Sunday night and into Monday, and that should start to shuffle some ducks around. I don't know if it's going to be enough to really provide pocket water / water out in the row crop setting, but
Mm-hmm.
I think just the weather pattern itself should trigger these ducks to start pioneering some different places, and that should really, really benefit the hunter who maybe hasn't had a whole lot of ducks on property during that first season. I'm hoping this weather event will get these birds out shopping for new resources, and that should improve hunting. Given the temperatures we've had, I think we're doing really good on overall numbers of ducks. The
Mm-hmm.
concentration is just what's probably affecting a lot of people's bags right now.
Yeah, and that movement around is bound to happen. I mean, these birds, they don't need to eat when it gets warm, but this year's at least been cold. So, once that rain comes and it hits some new food resources, they should shuffle around. And so folks keeping an eye on where birds are moving, especially that public hunter, to be a little more, adaptable there is going to be kind of a key component of this, right?
For sure, for sure. And it's a tough spot to be in with the current water situation we have, being a public hunter. I mean, it's a patience game.
Right.
It's you're competing with a lot of other hunters for a limited amount of locations and space. But those that lease fields and other properties in the state, I do think that with some wetland management and water management this
Mm-hmm.
fall, they should be primed up to start seeing some birds, entering their properties over the next week or so. We need something to kind of trigger this and this ability for ducks to go find resources again.
Yep.
And when that happens, generally speaking, the hunting improves drastically. Now, I want to make another note. We did shoot some juvenile ducks during the opener.
Mm-hmm.
So some hatchery ducks are starting to find their ways in our bags, which is really encouraging. It's been a while since we've seen that kind of show up, and I'm getting a lot of reports from other intensively managed properties that they're starting to see the same thing. Maybe not a huge proportion of their bag, but definitely a part of it.
Yeah, it's a positive thing for sure. The one thing that is in this week's kind of report too, our migration report and in this podcast that folks will hear, is that we are going into a little bit of a warm up in kind of Eastern North America for kind of the middle of December. But it's kind of wild card whether it'll get cold again. So, it might be really interesting to see if that warm up also comes with rain and reshuffling because the birds, are there more than they were last year. But everybody should kind of, I think, be kind of prepared for like this cold ain't going to keep going forever, right? It's going to flux. The idea this year, we're going to get a lot of weather whiplash with warm then cold and warm then cold, which is good for making birds, move around too throughout the season. So I think that's actually really, really encouraging. So once this warm spell kind of comes, after this cold, I don't think folks should freak out and think we're just going to be stuck in that all winter. And that's what we've said. I think like the overall average might be warmer than normal, but I think we're going to have enough cold shots throughout the year to move birds locally and then move birds south out of kind of mid latitudes. And that's really my hope, right? Is that everybody gets their fair share this year compared to last year where they hung up kind of every place.
Yeah, if we can get them down here, that's the first step. And then after that, I really think that yo-yo weather pattern lends itself to some good hunting opportunities. Shifting wind directions and frontal movements are always a lot more fun to hunt than the stagnant weather. I mean, we're really coming off this morning is very cool, but we're coming off like 6 or 7 days of sunny, nice sunny clear days, which is great for a timber hunter, but it's not necessarily the weather pattern that you get to see a lot of birds shuffle around and move around. And I'm encouraged that we'll get those cold pulses of air to get ducks on food, get them hungry, and then opportunities for them to kind of move around as fronts move through and we get some precipitation. For us, I really feel like precipitation is a driver of kind of distribution once you get, around Christmas and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember my times in the MAV in Mississippi and even hill country in Mississippi. And boy, we hunted I'm up north, but we hunted some gnarly, damp, cold, wet days that were worse on our hands than some of this dry cold we get up north. So, and man, did those birds move on those days. Those were fun. So there's a lot of reshuffling locally that happens with these birds. But I think at least y'all got at least there's some cold and there's some reasonable birds down, and they should keep coming, hopefully out of those mid latitudes for y'all. So, Ryan, thanks for being with us. We got a bunch of other people to jump to and get on here, and but good luck to you in the blind in Arkansas when it opens back up, and thanks for everything you're doing for the ducks out there through your work on the private marsh as well as your consulting stuff with everybody across the kind of Mid-South region. So appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the chat. Everyone be safe out there.
All right, next up, right from the boat, I think, scouting is Aiden Flores. He is Captain Aiden Flores. He is the proprietor of Heritage Flats Guide Service, and you do ducks and fishing, right, Aiden?
Yes, we do both. We do both guided duck hunts and redfish and black drum fishing trips.
Awesome. On the Gulf Coast of Texas. And you're also the R3 coordinator for Delta Waterfowl?
Yeah. So my main role as a regional R3 coordinator with Delta Waterfowl is to oversee our university hunting program. And as of this year, I oversee 38 programs between Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Arizona.
Yeah, I always just think all you do is Texas because you're a Texas kid. Hey, the other thing for our listeners is Aiden was a student of mine. One of actually my first master's students several years ago worked out on eastern Long Island. The only thing close to Texas there was that it was also coastal. Worked on mallards and black ducks and has both of his papers published almost. The Wildfowl Journal one is coming out. It should be out very, very soon. Congratulations to Aiden on getting his research papers done. But Aiden's going to give us a little bit of an update on what he's been seeing on the Gulf Coast flats there. Give us a little rundown of the area that you generally cover with your guide service and kind of what you can tell us about birds on the Texas coast, Aiden.
Yeah, so on a regular, let's say daily basis, I cover coastal wetlands between Rockport, Texas, down to the very northern end of Corpus Christi, Texas. And so the main bay systems that I cover and hunt, those are going to be Redfish Bay, Aransas Bay, Corpus Christi Bay, and all of the mangrove wetlands in and around those shallow flats. And this year, our season started very similar to last year. We are so weather dependent. We always have the habitat, but if up north doesn't get cold, we don't get ducks. And so we started off slow, but about 2 to 3 weeks ago, when some more cold weather started pushing through, we did start to see quite a few more birds. And this part of the Texas coast, redheads are king. We always have redheads, and we definitely have tens of thousands of redheads, and with each little cold spell, we are starting to get more diversity with the puddle ducks. So pintails and widgeon particularly, they are starting to show up here in bigger numbers. Bluebills, buffleheads, as well. And then the Texas coast kind of it's a very mixed bag shoot of, you never know what's going to come by, whether it's teal or shovelers or canvasbacks, or someone in Rockport a week and a half ago, they shot scoters. It's kind of just go out and be prepared for everything. You can count on your 2 redheads, but be prepared for.
Well, we tried to come hunt with you last year, and then I had truck troubles in Mississippi, and we never made it that way. So one of these days, I got to get back. But the good thing is here, I got a really nice, new Chevy RST racing truck out of it in the trade-in with a V8, not one of those things that transfers back and forth and no EcoBoost garbage, just a straight old V8, which is nice in straight black. So maybe we'll get down there to see you someday, or I'll fly down and check the place out. But so on the puddle duck end, so you got your redheads in a little bit. Now you're in your split. You're in your split, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So our second opening weekend, it is going to be not this weekend, but the following weekend, December 14th and 15th. So hopefully we still get some cold come through the northern states. Birds have another 10 days to come on down to us.
There you go. Yeah, we hope so. I mean, it sounds like there might be a little mid-December warm-up for y'all, but my expectation is it's got to be better than last year. Let's go with that, right?
Anything is better than last year. We had 2 solid weeks, and the rest was a grind.
So this is unscripted completely, but you had airboat problems last year, and your dad ran into, I think, my wife at a conference somewhere and just said, I wish Aiden wouldn't have boat parts everywhere in the garage the whole time. I'm guessing the airboat's up and running again, nice and fine, right?
Yes. Last year was my whatever could go wrong did go wrong year, boat wise. And I blew a motor, and then it took 3 rebuilds to get the camshaft to break in properly. It just a whole long process, but the boat is now running great. There are no more accessory parts lying around, and we are good to go.
So I want to do this for you too. Your Heritage Flats Guide Service and Outfitters out of Rockport, Texas, correct?
Yep.
And so how do people get a hold of you, Aiden, if they wanted to hunt with you? Or fish?
We are on Facebook, Instagram, and we do have a website which does have my cell phone number on it as well. That is heritageflatsoutfitters.org. And you can also book both hunting and fishing trips directly through the website. Yep.
That's awesome. And I interviewed you years ago for your master's project, and then one of my mentors, Dave Ankney, and his partner Sandy would hunt with you guys and bring their dogs down, and that was that was when you were a kid just starting to guide, and it was so cool to bring you up to New York, and that was after Dave Ankney had actually passed, but he always talked very fondly about you and your dad and the Texas coast, that he would go down and hunt in the winter. So that's super cool stuff. I'm guessing you've got a lot of repeat type people like Dave that come hunt with you, don't they?
I would say probably 70% of my client base, which the large majority have also become very good friends of mine. 70% are repeat and return, clients and customers, and I pride myself in that, because if I can provide a good experience, I would rather have the same people keep coming back. And aside from having good hunts and good fishing trips, I have also made a lot of good friends from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And those are kind of the cool experiences that keep bringing people back. Well, my wife and I and the dogs will have to come down. Maybe we'll be kind of a Dave Ankney and kind of Sandy couple one of these days when we get our free time in the future. So really appreciate everything you're doing for the ducks and for the duck hunters through Delta Waterfowl Foundation. And just appreciate you as one of those people out there, Aiden, doing all the good work for the birds. So thanks for giving us a little bit of an update, and let's hope you get the rest of those birds coming down from Kansas and Oklahoma and everywhere else into your part of the world.
Let's hope. Thank you for having me.
All right, so last up from Missouri, we've got Reed Vagoot, Migratory Bird Coordinator with the Missouri Department of Conservation. And Reed just started in October. But he does have a wealth of knowledge because he did his graduate degree at Mizzou, testing drone counts on was it on the Missouri Department of Conservation lands mostly, Reed?
Yep. Yeah, it was on those intensively managed wetlands that they have throughout the state. So it was all public land.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and as a lot of our listeners know, I spent time in the Boot Heel in Missouri, but I didn't get up into kind of the Columbia area or anywhere north. I spent all my time at like Duck Creek, 10 Mile Pond, and Otter Slough, but really have super fond memories. I have a whole entire episode about a blue-winged teal hunt at 10 Mile Pond that was just awesome, and it's like burnt into my brain. So I really respect everything Missouri does, and you're lucky to be in there in that, official capacity. So you are like the waterfowl biologist on the technical section for the Mississippi Flyway of Missouri, right, Reed?
Yep, that's correct. And then, represent Missouri for different species of migratory game birds, dove, woodcock, rails, things like that as well, too. So it's not just waterfowl.
Yeah, certainly. And that's a heavy one. You don't do turkeys, though, do you? You don't do upland stuff?
No, only migratory game birds.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, I did all that stuff plus rough grouse and wild turkey for the state of Maine for 3 years. So I feel it's fun, man. It's a great job, but I'll go with I feel your pain. It's heavy sometimes. The people are passionate, especially those waterfowl hunters, right?
Yeah.
So you get a lot of input. Hey, so we want to talk about what your bird numbers are looking like, but let's start out a little bit with habitat. There was some drought here and there. There was a lot of rain from hurricanes and other places, but what did Missouri look like, and what are wetland conditions looking like right now for y'all?
Yeah, so throughout the growing season and into the early fall, Missouri was extremely dry. Habitat, vegetation on these wetlands, moist soil, things like that grew well over the summer, don't get me wrong, but overall it was very dry. To start the season, it was extremely dry. Opening weekend across the north and middle zones, most of Missouri, the wetlands were limited to those that were capable of pumping waters. There really wasn't any flood water, any rains to fill opportunistic wetlands. Then, a few hurricanes came through. We got some rain in the southeast portion of the state, and then we just got some other just absolutely torrential downpours through the end of October and most of November. Areas of November or areas of the state in November got 150% normal rainfall. So
Wow,
definitely increased some of those
yeah.
opportunistic wetlands and habitat out there for the birds.
And that's like perfect timing right before it started to cool off, I think, right? Because October was
Yeah.
still really, really warm. But you kind of have like this tale of two migrations. We were talking before we got you on here real quick. You want to just contrast kind of last year to where you're at this year with duck migration?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, we got a big push of birds at the end of October, right at the beginning of our North Zone opener, just before the Middle Zone opened. We got basically, I don't want to say all of our birds, but we had close to, static numbers throughout the entirety of the season up until it really froze and kind of concentrated some birds at the end of the season. But for the most part, yeah, we had a lot of birds show up at the end of October with the cold front. This year's definitely been a little different. It was warm through October, warm through most of November. It really wasn't until mid-November that we started really seeing an uptick, especially in mallards. We had early dabblers come through at the end of October, early November, as per usual, kind of what we call like the calendar birds.
Yep.
Veterans Day birds, those certainly showed up despite the warm weather and south winds. But then, yeah, come Thanksgiving, I mean, just the last 5 or 6 days, it's really froze up and cooled down, and we got a large influx of birds. You can see that, reflected in our duck numbers, and then harvest reports from around the state have jumped drastically the past week or so.
Yeah, as we were talking, I went in and looked, and like Missouri's old. I think like the original goal on those conservation areas was to try to get everybody at 3 birds per hunter, and you obviously can't control like whether people hit things or not. But if those numbers are at 3 birds per hunter on a regular basis, that's pretty good. I don't think they hit that on a lot of them. But the big ones like Grand Pass and Three Rivers and Fountain Grove and Otter Slough, like those are just ones that come to mind for me that always hit those. And Nottoway Valley sometimes on the upper northwest corner does really good numbers, but they seem to be dropping a little. And I wonder if are they getting a little colder than further down? It's kind of a big transition from northern Missouri to southern Missouri right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, especially with how this cold and ice and snow has kind of formed across the state. Mid-Missouri got a lot of snow, 4 inches of snow over Thanksgiving weekend.
Wow. Yeah.
But the northern part of the state and the southern part of the state didn't actually get any snow. They just got cold.
Interesting. Yeah.
Northern Missouri, talking to, you mentioned Nottoway Valley, Bob Brown's up there too. Los Bluffs, that refuge, talking to those managers, some of their pools, they're estimating 4 inches of ice that they had after this cold weather. That's not to say that's not still there. The weather's been very fluctuating the last couple of days and really changed some of that. But yeah, they got very cold. Not Nottoway Valley, sorry. Los Bluffs lost about half of the bird numbers that they had going into Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So are you, then on species kind of transition, are you those early ducks? I like to call them wimpy ducks. We find that weather actually does drive them. They just happen to be at you by the time your season's open, especially in the South. So I get why people call them,
right,
calendar ducks, but they do still vary a bit by the weather. But have you seen kind of a lot of those birds kind of start to decrease, or at least mallards increase? Like, what's the species kind of fluctuation going on across the state right now?
Yeah, it's definitely trending towards the mallards. Like I said, it depends. We got a big gradient across the state right now, especially with these weather patterns. You mentioned Otter Slough down in the Boot Hill as one of those areas. That one's always a little unique because they never really get cold enough to push a lot of those other duck species out, which also helps drive harvest numbers up. But northern Missouri, central Missouri, northwest, northeast Missouri, those parts of the states definitely heavy mallard concentrations, and a lot of the birds that have left has been those other dabbler species, and those kind of ended up down in the Boot Hill. That's not to say there's not mallards down there, but as far as concentrations or proportion of birds, we're definitely mallard heavy at this point in the northern part of the state.
Yeah, that's really what I'd like to hear, because the weather severity index that we use that predicts where birds should be at is basically saying, it's that difference between the years is pretty much exactly what we had predicted this year. And I'm just, it was such a bad year last year for folks in the South that I'm really hoping that y'all in Missouri in the mid-latitudes, what I consider mid-latitude for the most part through your state, get this good hunting season. And then those birds move down, Christmas, New Year's, and into January time, and everybody gets their shot at them. I really hated going on each week last year and reporting no new news. I mean, it's warm, and the birds are kind of everywhere up north. It was kind of a depressing year to report on, But I'm really looking forward to this year for all the hunters in general, I think.
Yeah, and even though we had a lot of birds last year, like I said, we got them at the end of October, and even our hunters in the state were kind of frustrated. We're like, we have a lot of birds, but they've been here the entire year, and they don't do too much anymore. Kind of
they
thing.
They get stale when they figure out where food's at and where refuge is at, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And this year we've been fortunate where we've been, increasing those duck numbers throughout the season. So, plenty of new birds to stir things up. So hunting's been really good this year, just as a factor of that too, despite, we just now caught up to normal numbers or average numbers for the last 20 years. We just hit our 20-year average number before that. I mean, there were some weeks we were, 50% below average as far as mallards went. But you really didn't hear too much from the hunter side of thing because we kept having new birds come in and the birds were moving around.
Yeah, that's good to know. So that's the fresh bird kind of theory that I have, right? That's really what you need to have successful hunts is these naive birds showing up. What I think that people in the south of you don't want to hear is I remember looking at numbers on Grand Pass and you guys holding like 250,000 mallards into like the first week of January. So let's hope you don't do that this year, Reed.
Yeah, that all depends on the weather. It's got to get cold enough for them to leave. I mean,
yeah, we're getting a little bit of a warm up, but 4 inches of ice in Northwest Missouri is definitely making a move. So,
yeah,
but good stuff. Really appreciate you on, and I like the positive report on good bird numbers and good movement of birds this year. So Reed, thanks for being with us. I know it was short. We'll try to maybe get you back on and maybe talk about your drone research a little bit in the future. So thanks for being here and thanks for everything you do for the Ducks, Reed.
Thank you.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Well, if that doesn't get you excited about chasing ducks, I'm not sure what will. Next up, our weekly duck migration forecast. Will the cold continue to push into the deep south? Oof. Please stick with us. Hold on, folks. Don't turn that channel. We've got some really exciting news for you. The FowlWeather Podcast has teamed up with Wildlife Strategies. That's right. I'm now working directly with Ryan Delaney of Wildlife Strategies to build value into your land. Wildlife Strategies is already known for quality wildlife habitat management, be it deer, turkeys, ducks, or whatever you pursue. Ryan knows his stuff. Look, I don't add my name to just any business, but I believe in what Wildlife Strategies is doing for landowners throughout the Southeast U.S. and beyond. If you want science-based solutions to create great wildlife habitat, Wildlife Strategies is your best bet. If you're interested in ducks, when we say, may your skies be filled, well, Wildlife Strategies does just that. They fill your skies with ducks. Contact Ryan Delaney today at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. You won't be disappointed you did. Ryan covers the southern tier of states, and I'm available to build habitat management plans across the northern tier. Contact us today for a quote. The Wildlife Strategies team sees your property through from the initial assessment and development of a 3-year time frame management plan through annual check-ins and course corrections as needed. Contact Ryan today at ryan@farmlg.com or Dr. Mike at FowlWeather.co. You won't be disappointed you did. Fill your skies with ducks and your forests and fields with deer and turkey with Wildlife Strategies. Remember, if you are interested in wetland or other wildlife habitat consulting, to contact me at drmike@FowlWeather.co. Our schedule is really filling up fast for the 2025 season, so if you have interest in a site visit, give me a shout. Our services can also be found by going to FowlWeather.co and clicking on the consulting link in the upper right corner of the page. I really want to get into this week's duck migration forecast. That was a lot of great information from all our great friends across duck country, but man, it's weather whiplash. That's what it is. Starting in the Atlantic Flyway this week, we see a warm-up and rains on top of snow in the Great Lakes region early in the week, a dip in temperatures starting on Thursday that is only to rebound by the weekend with daytime temperatures once again well above freezing. So less snow activity this week than last week in the East and Great Lakes, and a stalled mallard, black duck, and diving duck migration for now. But the cold last week moved a lot of birds into mid-latitudes and coastal regions already, so we should be happy for that. If there's going to be a migration this week, it's going to be in the kind of other dabbling duck area for the Atlantic coast on Wednesday night and into Friday morning, but not much real movement into the far south reaches of the flyway, as temperatures are generally mild in the mid-latitudes of the Atlantic flyway. In the Mississippi Flyway, the cold temps from last week in the deep south moderate, but we do get a 48-hour punch of cold that will bring temps in the single digits into about the latitude of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, and northern Illinois, and that will result in temperatures in the teens in mid-Missouri. I don't think this is enough to move mallards out of Missouri yet into the deep south in appreciable numbers. And in fact, the state of Missouri on their conservation areas alone is sitting at their last count at over 800,000 mallards right now. I'd expect that number to even jump more this week rather than decrease as the cold to the north pushes remaining mallards south into those mid-latitudes. I'd say, hey, think about this. For example, about 85% of all ducks in Iowa right now are mallards, with most other dabbling ducks all having moved south. Areas as far south as southeast Missouri and Kentucky may see a spitting snow Wednesday and into Thursday with northwest winds, and our WSI does predict movement south of these areas for pintails, gadwall, widgeon, shoveler, and green-winged teal. Let's reboot that. Areas south of the boot heel of Missouri and Kentucky are predicted to see movement of pintails, gadwall, widgeon, shoveler, and green-winged teal. So folks in the mid and deep south should have fresh ducks for the end of the week and into the weekend. Farther west in the Central and Pacific Flyway, mallard migration is going to come to a screeching halt this week. So whatever mallard you have, be careful on the pressure because our WSI predicts that they will get really stale this week. The only areas that will get new mallards may be immediately south of the freeze line in Nebraska and maybe northern Kansas. And the only favorable winds are early in the week and they end by Wednesday. Right? So we don't expect any measurable migration most of the week, but if it's going to happen, it's going to be earlier in the week. Farther west in the Pacific Flyway, we see opportunities for a trickle migration of all ducks other than mallards throughout the week, but that's going to also happen especially earlier this week. It's going to decrease as the week progresses into the weekend. overall in the prairies and the west, the snow line creeps a little bit south, but it's kind of stagnant at about the Canadian border right now. So mostly what we're working with is cold and not that snow that's going to push ducks south. So overall, a much slower migration this week than last week is predicted. But folks in the mid-latitudes of the Mississippi Flyway, given that cold that's kind of pushing down for a few days up north, should look for bunches of fresh mallards. Everyone else that has mallards should be really mindful of the pressure, as they're going to get smart and stale really quick, right? Everyone else across the Flyway should look for a trickle of dabbling ducks. And I think folks are going to really need to follow kind of the local weather, the rain, the snow, and the wind patterns that are going to be key to your hunting success as local ducks reshuffle. And remember, the FowlWeather Podcast is not responsible for your bad decisions, so please be safe out there. And also, don't forget to go onto our Instagram and Facebook accounts and register for our Week 2 Listener Appreciation Sweepstakes. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled, and shoot straight, my friends.